and then I'll go through the C-suite slides, and then I'll turn it over. Okay. And most of you are members, so you're very aware of C-suite, but in case you're not, we are a national organization for executive women. We are going into our 9th year with C-suite. We are opening up 3 additional chapters this year. Archita is launching Austin with us in March at Q2, which is a large bank in Austin with a couple other executive women, and we look very forward to that. And so we are doing our programming out through the end of the year. So if you have an interest in one of our programs, let me know. I'm taking kind of lead with that. We do continue to focus on brand acceleration, career expanding, networking, making those connections for you. We just had this week, one of our CEOs was looking for a corporate lawyer, so we were able to make that connection for her. And then we had a nonprofit that was looking for a programming director, so we made that connection. So I just want to let you know that all that happens in the background. I don't know where my slides went. Okay, there they go. We do have executive search, and we actually used executive search to help with the nonprofit position. So if you have a position that you're looking for key executives, let us know and we'll help you with that. Again, we can't do this without our partners and sponsors, and we are currently renewing sponsors for 2026. So if you have a connection with a key sponsor that you feel would be good for C-suite and a good match, let us know. We did add a philanthropic partner, which I need to add to my deck, which is Make-A-Wish. So we have Red Rover, Maryval, Bloom Again, and Make-A-Wish. And so they will be coming on and talking about their efforts and their focuses for 2026. So stay tuned for that. And we are very blessed. And Archita Bhatt actually spoke at one of our New York events. And as Beth and Diane do, we discussed with her opening a chapter in Austin because we thought she would just rock it. And so we're very
Thank you.
blessed. We're very blessed to have her with us today. And as you know, she's the CEO and owns her AI company, and I'll let her AstreaWorks and kind of go through her background. She's here to talk to us today about reclaiming the power when your title outruns your authority. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I will turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can see my screen, or should I? You can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can see your
First
screen.
slide.
Mhm.
So thank you for being here. And my information in the event, all my information is there, and my background. So I don't want to bore you with what I have done in the past 2 decades. I want to jump right in, if that's okay. And I'm recovering from bronchitis, so in the middle you'll see me sipping hot water. So excuse me for that. So let's jump right in. Um, I run, just quickly, I do run a process automation AI firm. And the way I see, and I saw this problem, and that's why I brought this to Beth, saying that now we're getting into, as she said, the year of the fire horse, and our energies are shifting. And I wanted to bring my personal experience, but also kind of, I would say I diagnosed it as I do a system problem, right? So when systems break, or when you're designing, how they should work, it's no different than when authority structures break, right? It's the same way enterprise architectures break. So it happens when ownership is unclear and accountability is kind of hazy and nebulous. So just like software systems, when nobody knows who owns a module, I've seen bugs pile up, and nobody owns the decision. Things get very frustrating, and it's the same problem. It's a different domain. So I wanted to bring this to this session because I have been and lived in this gap myself, and I believe it can be solvable. So disclaimer, I'm not a coach, so hopefully you all will find this useful. And I've found in a short time I've been with C-Suite, it's a powerful platform, and all women who are looking to succeed, and especially ambitious women who are looking to succeed, I feel this is a great platform, and it's within reach for all. So I'm excited to start the new chapter in Austin. And Austin is an area that is with many different industries, great women in leadership positions that could be, transportation, construction, the state government. There's amazing opportunity here now with a lot of technology folks who are coming in, manufacturing, the Teslas. It's just complete mixed bag, if you will, of women and women leaders. So I'm really excited to start the chapter. So let's just dig in. This is about reclaiming power when your title outruns your authority. I'm going to move to the next slide, if I can. Yeah, there you go. So first, let's start to name the pattern. And this is a pattern that most of you already know, right? Your scope, your visibility, your stress, all of this is increasing. And probably 2 years ago, you can compare it with a year ago. And just quickly, Beth, I won't be able to see if anybody raised their hand or has a question, or we could leave question and
Yeah, I'll
answers,
help you
or
out and put your, if you have questions, put it in the chat too. That's great.
yeah, yeah. And also I was thinking towards the end, we can even discuss if we need to go back to a certain slide that interested everybody and you want to have an open, candid discussion, we can. So I could just, go through what I have to share and then we can leave time for an open discussion, if that works for everybody. Um, getting back to this. So the idea is you have visibility, you have stress, but things like authority haven't moved as fast as the rest of it has moved. So you're not able to allocate the resources you want, you're not able to make the decisions you want, and whatever you think success is, the way you define it, it's the rest of the stuff is not keeping pace. So how many times have you said, maybe I'm not strategic enough, or maybe I need to work smarter, not harder, or maybe I need to be more assertive? And a lot of times people are telling you that, right? So I think we all have been kind of in that situation at some point. We may be in leadership roles today, but it has been a journey for all of us. So it's like a vicious cycle, right? So the promotion comes, maybe you get a raise that, I don't know, these days the raises are diminishing, but you may get a raise, you'll get a pat on the back, you may get a fancy title, but the things that give you authority and power may not be at the same level as your title. So in the end, what you'll realize is your responsibilities just kept rising and rising, and you're just going to get more stressed. So think of it as, it's not a personal problem, right? It's a predictable outcome. And this is how modern organizations are designed. So how do we break out of it is what I want to talk about. And it's kind of like you're given the keys to the car and you're said, okay, drive from East Coast to the West Coast, and you get excited. You're like, okay, sure, I'm in the car, and you have the steering wheel, but somebody else has a foot on the brake, someone else has the foot on the accelerator, and then there's a third person who keeps changing the GPS coordinates on you. So that is the pattern that happens when your authority doesn't meet your, responsibility. So that is more like a diagnostic. So ask yourself, right? If your scope, visibility, stress continue, but your power to say no hasn't. Now that is what you're diagnosing. That means you are in a situation. Okay. So that is the pattern I want all of us to, recognize. Now let's also say, what is the observation that I had? So there is a system truth to this. And McKinsey actually did a research. They tracked 300 companies over the course of 5 years, and they found direct correlation between any company that has design maturity. And when we say design maturity, it means people have clearly defined what the decision rights are. It's very crystal clear. So that means that company has a design maturity. And such a company is 3 times more likely to be innovative and to succeed, and 2 times more likely to reach their customer satisfaction goals. And that's a big deal, right? Because if you have clarity, and having clarity is not just a check mark on your leadership preference. Having clarity means it has a direct correlation to ROI. So Over here, you'll see on the left, and we'll get to the picture a bit later, but you'll see there's a functional structure and then there's a matrix structure. And a lot of, I would say, really large companies, they're kind of stuck in the matrix structure. Okay. So what happens? So in functional structure, your decision rights are clear, they're explicit, right? Then your accountability, there's a single point owner. So it could be project based, or it could be in general, large state government transformations, which I have delivered. Usually you have a board, you have a stakeholder, they're making the decisions. But the idea is it's not a hierarchical problem. The idea is you want to make the path to decision clear, right? So authority is formally delegated. And then the outcome are fast decisions and clear ownership. So what happens when it's almost like a top-down clarity that occurs? And with this, you get speed. Speed to innovate, speed to succeed, speed to, market. It could be anything, depending on where you are, if you want to get your product to the market, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in a matrix structure, which is kind of the opposite, and you see this in, they made so many movies where such a situation is there, where there's a lot of bureaucracy and nobody truly has the right to say yes or make a decision. It probably sits with one or two people, and getting time with them is probably difficult. So the whole organization sometimes can come and be stalled. So your authority is always negotiated at every meeting, and there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of argument, and it's a good point to recognize, like, where does your organization fall, right? So just having an organization chart doesn't mean the decision rights are clear, right? So sometimes a great title does not mean that the authority exists. So it must be explicitly delegated. So if it's explicitly delegated, you're on the right path. Otherwise, I call it consensus architecture, right? Everybody's got the veto, but no one really has the yes. So it's important to identify the system. What kind of a system are we in? Do we have design maturity or do we not? If we don't, how do I get myself powerfully positioned to succeed in such an organization? Because you can't always change the organization you're in. So now this one's a little, I would say, this is another layer, and we all have been here. This is what I call the gender blind, double bind. And it's not just about an organization's design, right? So it's a gender tax, if you will. And I've experienced it, and you probably have experienced it as well. If you are asserting authority, if you are, making clear decisions, you are directly and firmly handling your people, you're claiming credit when you've done great work, you tend to be labeled as, oh, she's very assertive or abrasive, or she's not collaborative, right? But if you're collaborative, if you lead with, kindness, and you that's your personality type, and you like to get input from others, you want to share credit generously, you're labeled as, she doesn't have it in her to be at the C table, right? So a lot of us have seen this. And I hate to say whether it's a man or a woman thing, but it's more a masculine versus a feminine thing. And it's more, in my mind, it's the kind of culture that's been created, right? So, and men may not face this bind the same way. And when they're decisive, right? Oh, that's a leader, that's leadership. And they're labeled as mover and shaker or go getter. And if you were the 90s, baller, shot caller. Sorry, I like old school hip hop. Yeah, but anyway, so the other thing is second generation bias. Now, what is the second generation bias? So, um, how do men show up? They show up with a certain masculine behaviors, and that traditional masculine behaviors have been tied to leadership. So everyone expects you to show up like that, right? So it's a social process. How you see yourself as a leader, that's not enough. others also have to recognize you as one. So to me, that this really matters, and we need to be aware of this, because as leaders of today, and we're setting the foundation for the women and the children who are going to be future leaders. So it's very important to see where we have been, where we are going. It's almost like the renaissance of how things are changing for women. Sorry. Sometimes it is, oh my God, where am I going? Sorry. Okay. I just hit my keyboard. I move my hands a lot, so I hit the keyboard, and it just jumped. But anyway, so the other thing is, I feel women are mentored to death. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but we get advice, we get support, but we need to ask the question: do we get the formal authority and sponsorship for advancement? And just the study from October 2025, it's not long ago, McKinsey did a paper, and it's a women in the workplace study. And they found that women are facing less career support and fewer opportunities to advance. And we're seeing more and more where companies are taking away that support they previously gave, right? And that commitment to support women's progress. So this makes us as leaders, we have to pause and we have to think, what do we want to do for the future generation? Because as humanity has moved from the Middle Ages, we've had the Renaissance, the rebirth of art and science and things like that. And as I said, two steps forward, one steps back. But in the last 100 years, we made a lot of progress. So this has to continue. And how we show up at work and what we do and what systems we set up is going to make a difference. So moving on. Now, we've talked about what the problem is. We've talked about, okay, there's a gender tax. Now, let's get practical, right? We want to transition from naming the problem to what are we going to do about it? Because ultimately, the systems thinking mind of mine said, how are we going to solve this? So I call it the four pillars of authority, right? So you've got decision rights, which is the power to move. It's the ability to make final calls without seeking permission. Then you have resource control, which is the power to execute. So it's the ability to allocate headcount, budget, technological tools, etc. Like what kind of, now we're talking about AI. Someone wants to bring in ChatGPT, or so what do you want to give to your team for them to be more successful? Do you have that authority to do that, for example? So the third one is narrative ownership, right? The power to define, the ability to define success, frame problems, control how your work is communicated. And fourth is escalation power. And it's very important. Do you have the power to unblock? Are you able to talk? Maybe do you have a direct access to the stakeholder who can make a decision, right? And are you able to override resistance and enforce accountability? Now, if you take a look at each of these pillars, right? A leader suffers from a decision rights gap when their choices are constantly second guessed. And how many times does that happen, right? You decide, you say, okay, this is how I want to go, this is my path. And there'll be two or three other people. And sometimes it's a more senior leader who says, no, that's not how we want to go. Or, every single time you need consensus for even the most minor expenses. So ask yourself the question, can you approve vendor contracts, for example? Can you change the roadmap without multiple approvals, right? Can you say no to a senior stakeholder? Are your decisions final, or are they subject to review constantly? Then for the pillar two, what are the questions you want to ask? Can you hire without multiple layers of approval? Can you move budget line items, right? Do you control compensation decisions for your team? And it happens all the time is you are accountable for the KPIs, right? But either the budget is cut, or maybe your senior staff has been reassigned to a new fire of the day. And it happens all the time. And I've seen this in software companies all the time. And then narrative ownership. Who is speaking for you? Sometimes you're not in the room, right? And the person in your success, if it's co-opted, then are they speaking in your favor? Is your credit diffused or is your name attached to it? So these are the questions you should ask yourself. Because a lot of times when you fail, you're analyzed under a microscope and sometimes without context. And that's very damaging to a person's, reputation. And again, we talked about escalation power. That's pretty clear because you want to be able to influence a change in path if things aren't going right, or at least be able to speak to the right people who can support you since you have all the responsibility and you're not having that control. So for each pillar, if you have a piece of paper, or I'm going to provide a handout at the end so you can write these down, and hopefully this will help. You want to be able to jot two things. What are you accountable for? And it's on the slide, right? Is it a decision? Is it control over resources? Are you able to define narrative? And what are you accountable for that you don't own? So here, what we're doing is we're identifying the gap so that it's not about blaming the exercise, as I noted there. It's for you to see things clearly about the current situation of yourself or your team member who may be in this situation. So as leaders, we can bring that culture for everybody to be able to identify that and grow. So without further ado, so let's do a quick exercise. Let's take 60 to 90 seconds. If you have a piece of paper, or you could put it in the chat, or if you want it to be private, you can write it on a piece of paper. And I have highlighted it. It says, I'm accountable for X, but I do not control Y. So for example, I'm accountable for P&L, but I don't control the budget. Or I'm doing a digital transformation project, but decisions are, all over in different silos, right? The goal here is it's almost like a diagnostic run, just like you would run a diagnostic on your computer to see, where, your permissions, your security permissions are not matching your processes, or similar. Having a diagnostic on the situation will help you identify the problem. And once the problem is identified, then we can set, a path and make our moves to fix it. So can we all take 60 to 90 seconds? And Beth, if folks can share, this is a safe space. You can put it down in the chat. It would be good to know.
How do they know what the cost of the gap is? Oh, hours spent. Gotcha.
Yeah, because once you name what the gap is, then you can think about the cost, right? So, and when I say cost, the cost is not, it's very concrete, right? At the end of the day, it's time, it's quality, it's maybe burnout is the cost, or maybe a strategic momentum. You're losing that because of this, right? And in the end, it's labor economics if you think about it. So if you've got a room full of, VPs who are not making a decision, what's your cost? It's the sum of hourly rate of every stakeholder in alignment meetings, and then how many hours are you spending in these redundant alignment meetings? So if your team is spending, like, say, 10 hours like this, and think $200 per hour for your senior members, easily you'd be in $100,000 in friction, right? In just meetings. And it's pretty significant. And these are all what I call ghost expenses, right? And it's hard to justify at the end. And reclaiming authority, it's not about, I would say it's not about ego, correct? It's your fiduciary, duty to make sure you don't want to have that organizational waste occurring. So if you've identified at least one gap, right? Now let's see how you're going to turn that into moves. And I don't see the chat window. Let me see.
Okay. So Jennifer said, I'm accountable for employees' growth and satisfaction, but I don't have control over promotions and headcount.
See, and again, that affects how you are visible and how you are presented to the team members. So yes, that's a pretty big gap. Any others?
Yeah, and she just said that the cost is unpaid overtime and burnout of teams. So I'm the CEO for business division to deliver IT services and projects, but all the resources are matrixed. And so I spend a lot of times doing functional type management to them because I have project meetings and so forth. But then I have no say in their training or when they take time off and all of that or oversight into that. So there's obviously a lot of hours spent around trying to manage those situations. Damon, you want to talk to yours instead of me reading your
Oh
thoughts?
yeah, I was just saying that, part of the advisory side of the business is coming up with really detailed uh, execution plans for clients,
Hmm.
after a lot of scenario planning. But I don't have any control about the integrity with which how they implement it or how they manage their teams or stakeholders to get behind it to what degree they need to. So sometimes you put something out into the world and you're waiting to measure its success or failure, but it's not being implemented the way that it should be, and you really can't control that. So that's frustrating. You know?
Yeah. Hmm. Yes. See, this is at least a start, right? We wanna identify, and to me, it was very hard because sometimes it's not about it's just the love of the job, right? You just get stuck in it, and I'm going to talk a little bit more because it's one of the moves that I had to make. So once we've identified the gap, the point is how are we going to fix it, right? You've diagnosed it. Now what? So there's three strategic moves, and think of these as your playbook, right? And as I mentioned, I'm going to give you a handout that you can take with you. Sorry.
That's great. Anybody else want to share? Okay.
And we can come back to it as well. So the first move is renegotiate. So when do you want to use this? So you want to use this when you don't have formal authority. Of course, that's why we're talking about moves, but your relationships, you have relationships, and you can build influence using that relationship. Second move, redesign. So the structure is unclear, but you can fix it because you're able to change the governance. You can use what we call RACI to kind of bring structure to an unclear situation. Okay, and then the third one is reposition. This is a bit more drastic, and we call it BATNA. You use this when the system cannot or will not change. But what you want to do is you want to change your relationship to the system. And this is move number three. So, notice something here, right? These aren't escalation of desperation. So these are all different tools for different situations. Like sometimes you need a screwdriver, sometimes you need a hammer drill, and sometimes you don't want to be in a house that's constantly breaking down. You might need to just change your house, go get a different house, right? So see it that way. You're using a tool for different situations. And not every situation can be fixed from within. So that's one thing I've realized. And I've realized that's not defeat. Okay, it's clarity. So I've highlighted there clarity is what will lead to transformation. Now, let's walk through each one. Okay, so first, move one. You're renegotiating. And to me, I just love this move. And I think this is so important. And as women, also for us, we need to get more comfortable with this move because what you're doing is you're building influence when there's no formal authority but you have good relationships, right? So and there's a word for this. It's actually the Cohen Bradford influence model, right? So there's three kinds of currencies that exist. So there's a task related currency, there's a position related currency, and there's inspiration related currency. So let's look at each one. So for task related currency, if you can make someone's life easier, right? That is a currency, and that's a very important currency. Do you agree? So as a maybe as a project manager, you have certain other skills and you're trying to move the needle on your project. Things aren't moving fast because maybe the product lead is running into issues and they need extra time, and they're running behind on QA or whatever. So sometimes you have business analysts and business requirements folks who are in delivery can assist and say, okay, I will give you my people and they'll help you with this to move your needle forward if you can help me prioritize my implementation timeline. So in delivery, we face this all the time. The product may not be fully ready and you're kind of building it as you go and as you're implementing. So there's a lot of friction between teams, but you can negotiate your way out of such friction. And it all happens when, relationships matter a lot, and relationships is what gets you out of those situations. So you should feel free to be able to have this barter system. And it's not a negative thing. It's not a political game playing or all these terms people use. It's not. And I see men doing this all the time on golf courses, in bars, and hey, I'll give you this. What are you going to give me? It's very clear, right? Now, position related currency. Now, if you can open doors for somebody, that is a currency. And it's a very powerful currency too, because you are opening a door for somebody to succeed. And you may not get something right away, but eventually they'll be having a conversation with some third person out there, and that person says, hey, I'm looking for XYZ. And then that person will say, hey, I know somebody who's doing that, right? When does that happen? It happens when you have helped somebody open a door. Not sometimes it's not expecting something in return right away. So again, this is also a very important currency, and recognizing these currencies matters. Then the third one is inspiration. If you can make someone feel more meaningful, right? That what they're doing, not someone more meaningful, but the work they're doing more meaningful, that is currency. So, maybe you're a state government leader. To them, it's not about salary, it's about legacy. What are they doing? What are they doing in these legacy modernization initiatives? They want to be remembered for bringing such and such change to their agency, right? That is what they're after. So if you are saying, hey, I'm going to make sure you sleep well at night, I will deliver an amazing project, I will deliver XYZ where you are going to succeed, you can speak to it in maybe in the National Associations of CIO. You can say, hey, I'm state agency leader so and so, and this is what I've done, this is what I've achieved. So that is a currency. So let's take a template. If you have the paper, or you can do it later. I offer X currency, or whatever currency. I request maybe a decision, a resource, or some kind of an access. So this gives you an idea of what currency you have and what do you have that you can barter back and forth. And a lot of times I've seen people waste time and their money because the other person also has to be able to reciprocate. So you don't want to waste your currency on, somebody who's not going to give you anything back. So that obviously comes with intuition, comes with experience, dealing with people, meeting people. And a lot of times it's, in organizations, and we are part of C-suite, and this gives you that space where you can safely have that renegotiating tactic and be able to be successful in your job or in your profession. So there's plenty of examples. I'm sure you can think of a few in this case, but like I said, you want to be able to reciprocate and and do this with people who are willing to reciprocate with you. And I feel, as women leaders, right, we should stop seeing this as a transactional or playing politics, and we should be able to see this as strategic partnership. And that's very important because, we're always offering something of value and we are getting what we need. So you should see this as strategic move and a play rather than, something negative or with a, I would say, narrow-minded lens, right? So, helping each other without viewing with suspicion is, I think, a very powerful move to use. So next, move number 2. So how do you redesign? So for example, so you're responsible, but then how do you get to accountable? And this is where you can use, yes? Did
Does
someone
someone
say
have a
something?
question?
I thought someone said something. Um, Sorry, if I'm talking too fast, tell me. Mhm. So this is a well-known matrix. It's called RACI. R is responsible, meaning does the work. A is accountable, owns the outcome, or makes the final call. C is consulted, meaning their thought process, or they're the ones who are providing the input to lead to a decision. And I is informed, meaning they're not actually actively doing stuff, but they need to be informed of what decision was made and you know where things are going. So, and again, here I can give examples based on my projects and engineering and stuff like that. So one example is the product lead wants to delay because they found some issues. Engineering is also saying, yes, we need to delay, right? But the governance committee, whether it's a board or project stakeholders, they're like, no, we need to be on budget. It could be a political thing. Maybe they need to meet the deadline, right? And the folks who are going to deliver the product, they're the ones on the hook for the launch date and the quality, right? So who's carrying the risk? The person who's carrying the risk may not even be in the room where the decisions are being made. So this is where either you have multiple A's, or the A, they just won't decide. And the person who has the R will be the person who's absorbing the cost. So as I mentioned, in many state projects, you've got the board, you've got the sponsors, but I've seen projects succeed when every time we have a stakeholder meetings where it's very clear that path to that decision. So the stakeholders know exactly where the blocks are in the reporting, and even though they're the ones who are ultimately holding the decision, things are flowing upwards in a very clear manner. So those are the projects that succeed. And those are the projects where you have the least friction. And when you're shaping outcomes, this is something that has to be set well before the project even starts. And this is not just about a project, right? It's about every aspect of how the organization is running. And as leaders, if we have this clear way to govern, it just, I would say the success would compound, right? And it's not being aggressive. And there's ways you can say it. I put an example here. I'm proposing we document who holds the A for this decision by Friday. So you're just trying to get clarity, and you're not trying to be aggressive or you know cause any kind of friction. So, and again, it depends on the teams, and the idea is to get alignment, right? So this is the second move that you can try. And third, obviously, it's the more drastic one, and it's called BATNA. What's BATNA, right? You're repositioning, meaning you need to know when to walk, right? It's radical, but BATNA stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. So in plain English, like, okay, what are your options if you walk away? Now, that's a very, very powerful answer. Like the answer is very powerful. And why? Because a lot of times we're so embroiled in our work, and uh, you're trying to get a project to succeed. And for me, I was in a startup. I was a partner in a technology low code no code platform. I personally built products with it, so it's kind of like a parent and a child relationship. It's very hard to pause or make certain decisions and to walk away from something when so many people are depending on you, when you're constantly getting texts, you're constantly getting emails, you're constantly putting out fires. So at some point, if you pause and you say, what are my options if I walk away? And you ask yourself the questions. And when you say walked away, I mean you're walking to a new role, or you're going to go into your own firm like I did, or you're moving into a sabbatical, which also I did. And you suddenly have leverage. You'll suddenly feel calm and you'll feel confident. Why? Because there's power in asking yourself that, And some of the questions I put here is, what's your timeline? What's your financial runway? What is your market signal? How do others perceive your value right now? And sometimes, how do you perceive your own value, right? So this pause in everybody's journey is needed. So for me, my BATNA came from a horrible burnout, okay? 2 decades, almost 25 years, like going nonstop, just working. And I did something very unfamiliar. I actually stopped. I said, that's it. I'm going to take a sabbatical. And everybody around me, including my boss, including the CEO, everybody who knows me, they celebrated. They were like, finally, yes, you need a sabbatical. And just go, and taking that real time to think, to sit quietly with myself and think about it with no title. There's no daily crazy momentum. There's no daily rush, right? And you're in this space and you're thinking about, okay, what was I capable of? And you're separating it. You're separating what was I capable of from what I had been conditioned to carry. And a lot of us, you know, being in an organization, being in a certain role, it's a kind of conditioning. You're constantly being kind of conditioned to be a certain way and to perform a certain way. So to kind of separate that and to understand that, you can only do that when you don't have that delivery pressure, constant pressure, budget, customer pressure. So taking that break, and nowadays more and more people aren't taking that vacation, and here it's just go, right? And there are countries where people pause, people take time, people, because recalibrating your life is very, very important. So out of that clarity is how AstreaWorks was born, right? And and I have to share this. Around the same time, I started AstreaWorks, and I was offered an opportunity to step into a role as a CEO and a seat at the cap table to run a cybersecurity firm. And I'm so deeply grateful for that. But I'd already set on this path, and due to certain, I realized prioritization is the most important thing. So I prioritize the right things instead of blindly running into that role. Because I took that time, because I was able to separate what I was capable of from what I was conditioned to carry, and this is very important, I was able to prioritize the right things and say no and continue on the path I started. And that is so powerful, right? So everybody's BATNA is different. And sometimes having a seat at the table, it may sound super valuable, but if that table is not what was designed for you to succeed, it's the wrong table for you to sit at. You agree? So I chose for myself the right environment for me to succeed. The journey might be a little slower, businesses take time to take off, but that's okay. It's a decision you've made from a right space. So there is power in this. I think asking those questions about, you know, uh, what will happen if I'm not in this role is an important question to ask. And time to time, I think we should be doing that. So, I know I highlighted leave before you're diminished, not after, but that's an important point because sometimes we get stuck in environments where there's too many close relationships. And people, and a lot of times you see this in roles where fresh out of college, you join a company and you're there for decades. And there are people who have seen you, fresh out of college. So they're seeing you a certain way, but guess what? You're growing, you're transforming, you're maturing, you're changing. So a lot of times the people who are closest to you don't see you for what you are today, right? So you, in a way, they're kind of failing you and your progress. So it's in your hands to sit with yourself and think what I want to do. And it's not about loyalty or commitment. It's just simply about, you're you're leaving a certain situation and you're moving forward and you're transforming. So and sometimes it's chronic misalignment and you just need to stop and think about it. And again, I say endurance does not compound, alignment does. And it's a very powerful sentence for you to think about. So let's. I put together a few tactical language over here, and it's not necessarily the right sentences for your situation, but just thinking of it as a verbal architecture, right? So sometimes you're not trying to be defensive. Did someone say something? Sorry, I was just hearing resound. Okay, so it's not you're not trying to trigger defensiveness. So you can look at the four examples I've provided. When roles are unclear, when you're being ignored, when credit is being co-opted, and when decisions keep getting second guessed. So here are some examples. And one of the things that I like is, especially when roles are unclear, right? You're not complaining. So if you look at that sentence, I want to make sure I understand who the decision maker is on this. Is it me or is it, say, person X? I'm asking because I want to know how to set expectations. So you're not complaining, you're just saying it, you're just seeking clarity. And there's a big difference. Now, when you're being ignored, right, what do? So it sounds like you're concerned about X. Is that accurate? So what does that do? I think it's a Jedi move, right? You're acknowledging their position before asserting yours. So you're kind of disarming their defensiveness because they have ignored and they're proceeding with something and you are being ignored. So you're highlighting and saying, okay, it sounds like you're concerned with this. So doing it like in a kind of a quiet tone is also important. You want to do it with quiet authority. I come from a very loud family. Everyone's emotionally charged. So it's particularly hard for me. So this is something that I had to practice. So I just want to, say that. And it's something that it will occur. And when it does, I tend to get, I'm an emotional person. So that's something that I really, really worked on. And then when credit is being co-opted, and this is something it's about appreciation, right? And you need to show what you have done and what your value is, but how do you put it forward? I appreciate the team effort, right? You start with appreciation, and then to be clear, I led the initiative, whatever the initiative is, and here's the outcome we delivered. Now, that's not you're not trying to, toot your own horn here, but it is important and people need to know. And if you are a leader, your team who looks up to you needs to see you do that because it's okay for them to do that. They can't you don't want people to silently, just do the work and be silent and just be silently ignored. It's not good and it's not healthy in any organization, right? So if they see you and they want to emulate you as a leader, so that kind of clarity has to be brought because people can't just take credit for what you're doing. Then when decisions keep getting second guessed, so and and this whatever I said over here, I notice we keep revisiting this decision. Can we clarify? Am I the decision maker or are we building consensus? And if it's consensus we're building, what is the timeline for that? Because getting consensus from everybody takes time, right? And it's not something that happens right away. So that time matters because if you're delivering a project that has a direct effect on you. So bringing it up that way, it forces the issue, but you're not creating conflict. So you're asking, it's like a process question. So the goal is to sound like you're stating a fact. And I kind of put like a formula, right? You observe, clarify, request, boundary. And that translates to subject, verb, right? Ask, what's your ask? And what's the boundary you're setting? So that I would say is like a tactical way to deal with this. Now, and I have like a commitment and something that because I wanted to do this talk because I speak in my circle in my mentoring And the women I speak with, we talk about it all the time that, hey, I'm facing this in my work, and I'm facing this, and this happened, or that occurred, right? And so having this methodology and having a way to solve this for ourselves. So pick one pillar, right? What's the authority alignment check? So that just pick any one of the pillars, and the one that's costing you the most, right? It could be in time, it could be credibility, it could just be burnout. And then pick one move. Do you want to renegotiate? Do you want to redesign? Do you want to reposition? And then make one concrete action. It could be a conversation. It could be that maybe you need to have a conversation with a leader, or a conversation with your team on something. And it could be an email. It could be a redesign proposal, right? Hey, let's do this RACI XYZ for this particular project to get this back, in alignment. And it could also be just an honest assessment of your BATNA, right? Sit with yourself and think. And in 30 days, you can ask yourself, did I narrow my gap? And that should be the goal. So that's the call to action I would like for all of us to try, right? And you write it down, because clarity is the first step to action. And as I said here, you're not doing this alone. We're all in it together, and we can do this together. And that's how we move the needle. And everyone in the room is making one move. And with that, we're going to shift the power. So thank you very much. So the gap between authority and responsibility, it's a design failure. As I said, it is solvable. And the phrase work smarter, be more strategic, things that are thrown around too much, the actual problem is structural, and it's the system that we need to try to change with our moves. So I hope this resonated, and I'm happy to continue the conversation. I provided a QR code for the handout. It's just one sheet of paper with some of the things that I mentioned today in the slide deck. So if you want to go deeper in this and you want to have conversations, please shoot me an email. I would love to speak to you, chat with you, connect with me on LinkedIn, and hope to meet you all in person one day. I'm going to look through the chats